to talk about in terms of extra stuff. Good morning, Raina. Um, there's extra credit tonight. I've already told you about that enough times. I don't need to tell you about it again. And other than that, Ellie and I were talking. I think there's only 2 more weeks, right? So we are actually kind of getting to the end of the semester in a very meaningful way. We're going to read this book and then we're going to write a paper and then we'll be done. Um, I had one person ask me, when are we going to get the prompts, because they want to start writing their papers. And I said next week. So keep reading. If you want to like get ahead on the paper stuff, read the book first. I imagine nobody's finished it yet. Maybe someone has. I don't know. But yeah, read the book first. I'll give you the prompts next week, and then you theoretically could start writing. And if you already have an idea of what you want to write about, you can write about anything. That'll be one option. And then I'll give you 3 other prompts. So 4. It'll be, specific topics that I will suggest, and then 1 will be anything you want. So if there are things that are jumping out at you as interesting, send me an email and we can talk about it. Okay, questions about anything? All good? Okay. So last time we discussed other power and self-power. You guys remember this? So we discussed Amitabha Buddha. We watched that kind of silly video, Namo Amitabha Buddha, right? Did anybody recite that as they were cooking dinner or something? That's what they promised in the videos. We didn't have to make any lifestyle changes. All we have to do is recite the prayer. But as we saw also, this is built on kind of what I would argue a more interesting practice, right? Where you fast and you become sleep deprived and you have this pretty intense week-long experience of trying to go deeper and deeper into this world of Amitabha, which, arguably you could say is create this world of Amitabha. And then you can bring that with you after you're done with this week-long retreat, right? So there are many different ways to approach this sort of practice of Pure Land, and it's a popular practice in the past and today. In normal times, maybe we could. I've never done this before, but there is a Pure Land church in the Upper West Side, Jodo Shinshu. We could even look it up. You guys want me to show you? You can go on an adventure one day during normal times. I don't know if this will work. Yeah, it's this one, New York Buddhist Church. So I've been outside of this. I've never actually been inside of it, but I'm curious about it, and it's pretty easy to get there. This, I think, is a statue of Shinran. He's Shinran Shonin. So if you look carefully at the dates, he lived a long time ago. So this is the tradition that we're talking about. And again, as you can see, they call themselves a church, which is kind of interesting. This particular group, the Jodo Shinshu group, rebranded themselves, let's say, to kind of conform to American religious standards, right? They call themselves churches. They have congregations. So this Pure Land teaching, it's an important one. It's an important one for understanding Buddhism today. So again, just a little review. Faith in Amitabha and his vow. What was his vow? Is that anybody who recites his name can visit him in the Pure Land. Once you go to the Pure Land, you can stay there until you achieve enlightenment. So it's this sort of step in between our usual difficulties of samsara and full enlightenment on the other side. And the main practice is reciting his name. Chinese is Amitofo. In Japanese, Amida Buddha, Amida Butsatsu, I think is how you say it. I'm not actually sure exactly the phrasing for Japanese. And so this ensures rebirth in the Pure Land. So that's the basics of the practice. We also saw faith in the Lotus Sutra, right? Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. And so that was the special Nichiren practice. This is all happening during the degenerate age. Remember, that was a theme we talked about, and we discussed how we actually kind of live in a degenerate age, which you look around, there's a lot of evidence for that. Now we are going to turn to Zen, and maybe just off the bat, I don't know if you guys know anything about Zen. We've theoretically started reading this book now, so we've seen a little bit about Zen, but we can keep it general. You don't have to reference the book. What's the role of faith and belief in Zen? Maybe we can make it even more general. Throughout everything we've learned so far, other than this Amitabha Buddha and the Nichiren, because clearly faith is important in these practices, where have we seen faith and belief? Has that been a big part of Buddhism? Brendan? In the teacher. That's a great answer. Yeah. And what are some examples of faith and belief in the teacher? Close. You took Tilopa and Naropa and put them together, but his teacher was actually Marpa. So, but again, they're all kind of in a line. And then, of course, Milarepa had his own students too. And then those students had students. And there really is this sense of a lineage, going all the way back to the Buddha, is what people say. So yeah, if you couldn't hear him, Brendan was talking about faith and belief in the teacher, pure perception, guru yoga, remember all that sort of stuff? That's all about developing faith and belief, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Other things? That was a great example. Other things we might believe in? Is there any form of belief in, for example, the Four Noble Truths? Or is that all logical and rational? You can see it both ways. There is definitely logic to it, but I think there is some belief too. What sort of faith or belief would be in the Four Noble Truths? Just to remind you, Four Noble Truths are about suffering, arising, the causes of suffering, right? Cessation, so the end of suffering, and then the Eightfold Path, the path that leads to the end of suffering. Where does faith come in there?
I guess there's a certain degree of just like faith in the form of trust, like in the process of the order and that.
Trust the process. Isn't that Joel Embiid's thing? Joel Embiid, the process. Yeah, you got to trust the process. Yeah, exactly. So what is the process in the Four Noble Truths? Is that if you go through the Eightfold Path, if you follow these instructions, you will achieve enlightenment, right? It's a promise that we don't know the answer to, right? Because theoretically, we are all unenlightened. And so we have to trust the process that if we follow these steps, we will become enlightened, right? Yeah, very good. Another piece that we talked about too is Buddha nature. I think that we could pull into this conversation. Where does faith and belief come in there for Buddha nature? What do you have to believe in for Buddha nature to matter? So I'll remind you, Buddha nature is, you've got like the golden statue covered in filth. You've got the mango seed that gives rise to the giant tree. You've got the treasure buried under the poor person's house. You've got the sexist and kind of offensive one of the noble child in the womb of a ignoble woman. What does that have to do with Buddhism? These images. He was on the exam. That's why I'm quizzing you now. These are the lessons I want you to take away from this class. What does that have to do with Buddhism? Some of you got this right on the exam. I know some of you know this. Buddha nature. And the thing on the exam was the stinky flower with the Buddha image inside of the stinky flower, right? What is this all supposed to symbolize?
That enlightenment is there. We just need to take scales off our eyes, feel it, see it.
Hey, take the scales off your eyes. Is that coming from this book? Yeah, good. So Brendan's making connections. I love it. Oh, people in the chat are talking. Belief that the virtues of the Buddha are already with you. Yes, very good. Good. So the reason I'm refreshing your memories on this subject is because it will show up in this book. And so it would be easy to think this other power, self-power thing, it just means we have faith and then we have rationality on the other side. That's usually how we kind of split the world up, right? You have belief on one side and rationality on the other side. That's kind of the trap I set for you when we did mindfulness versus magic, right? One is more rational and one's kind of irrational. But what I'm trying to do here is help you break out of that and see there's faith in both of them, right? This is religious studies class. There's definitely faith in both of them. It's just how does it manifest? Where are you placing your faith? Where are you placing your belief? Are you placing it in something else, in an other, or are you placing it in yourself? And Zen at least presents itself as being more about self-power, right? Belief in yourself. So what sort of belief are we talking about? Brendan kind of just said it. It's this Buddha nature. It's this sense, and also Colin in the chat was talking about it, the sense that we have this great capacity. This is a central part of Zen. We'll also see there's great doubt. Doubt is a big part of this too. So it's not all just about faith and belief, which is maybe a familiar idea. Doubt is an important part of this. Where do you think doubt comes in? Can doubt be useful? You guys ever doubt yourselves? What happens when you doubt yourself? Is that a useful experience or is it not useful? Jocelyn says not useful. Why is it not useful?
Because you gotta believe in yourself in order to do or achieve anything.
That's a pretty common way of thinking, right? It's like you got to believe in yourself, and only then will you achieve your goals. Have you ever heard this sort of thinking before? We hear this all the time, right? This is a book that's going to tell you doubt yourself and believe in yourself. It's not, you don't have to choose either one. It's saying, but you do need to doubt yourself. When can doubt be useful? I agree with Jocelyn that belief is important, and that's one thing this book is saying. But doubt is also important. Why does doubt matter? What can doubt do for us?
You could argue that it like pushes you further, like gives you more motivation.
Helps give you motivation? I would agree with that. How does it help give you motivation?
Because I guess you don't think you can do something, then you would have to like put in more, like actions speak louder than words, even if they're in your head. So like it would push you to work harder, to practice more.
I like that idea. So if you couldn't hear her, Jocelyn is saying doubt gives us a little bit of space, right? Where we see that we are here, but we want to be here. And so it gives us space to grow, right? If we don't realize that we are actually short of the goals we are trying to achieve, then we will not be able to grow into those goals. In some ways, what I want to lead us to is the difference between arrogance and humility. And this is something, I think it's somewhere in the ether in America. Humility is often seen as weakness, but I think for reasons that Jocelyn just expressed, humility allows us to become stronger, frankly, a lot of the time. And I think that's part of this too. What's the difference between believing in yourself and being arrogant? Can we draw a line between those two things, Brendan?
Be arrogant to, I guess, blindly assume that you are right and not consider other possibilities, which would be a pretty foolish way to live.
Yeah. So Brendan said arrogance is blindly considering you are right and not considering other possibilities, right? And we've probably met people like this before, right? In fact, we're surrounded by them. And there is a certain power that comes with arrogance, right? If you kind of enter the room and you think I'm the most important person that's ever been born, you know, I could imagine a certain president that just stepped out of office, right? That kind of embodies this idea. There is something we value about that sort of arrogance in our society. But at the same time, again, coming back to Jocelyn's point, there's something limiting about it too. Is that a hand, Brandon? What are you thinking? Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure. If you wanted to talk, you're welcome to. So what does this have to do with our conversation here? This idea of self-power, this idea of believing in yourself is really key to Zen. And this whole book is about this topic in some form or another. There's also some other power, belief in the teacher, like we were talking about a moment ago. But there's also belief in yourself. And in fact, the way it's presented in this book, I would argue, ties these two things together. The more capable you are of believing in your teacher, the more capable you will be of believing in yourself in helpful and in, we could say, productive ways. Okay, so that was a good conversation. Why don't I give you guys a little exercise? I feel like I've been lecturing kind of a ton recently, so I think I will turn things over to you all. This is a little challenging. I guess that what I could have done is made a Google Doc and given these to you, but I think I'm just going to dump it in the chat. And give you these poems. So this is not in the book, it's not in the reading, but this is a really key sutra. It's called the Platform Sutra. And I think what we can do is let's sit with this for a little while. I want you guys to read this and discuss it and basically try to make sense of it. There are a few images here. So I'll just read this first paragraph to you. It says, the body is the Bodhi tree. We've talked about Bodhi before. Remember Bodhisattva, Bodhicitta. Bodhi is also the tree under which the Buddha achieved enlightenment. That tree itself, that species of tree is called the Bodhi tree. So there's a play on words here. The body is the Bodhi tree. The mind is like a clear mirror. At all times, we must strive to polish it and must not let the dust collect. So I'm going to turn you guys over into a breakout room in a minute, and I want you to discuss what is happening in this poem. And as you're thinking about it and maybe writing down some notes and trying to decipher these symbols, I can tell you the story. So the story goes is, this is, I guess it'd probably be, I think like the 7th century. It's a long, long, long time ago, early in the history of Zen. This is a Chinese figure. You can tell from the name Shenxiu. So Shenxiu is supposed to be kind of the next hierarch of Zen Buddhism. He's going to become the main teacher, or at least that's the plan. And so to celebrate this plan, his teacher asks him to write a poem. He writes the poem out, puts it in the courtyard kind of for everybody to read, and then, you know, goes on with his life. And in a moment, sort of like Good Will Hunting. Have you guys seen Good Will Hunting? Where the guys do the math problems at night or whatever. So in a moment, sort of like that, another guy comes by. His name is Hui Neng. And he writes a different poem that kind of criticizes the first one. And I'll read it to you. I think what I'll ask you to do is just focus on this first one. You can talk about the second one too if you want. This one's harder to understand. So I'll read it to you and you can think about it. Bodhi originally has no tree. The mirror also has no stand. Buddha nature is always clean and pure. Where is there room for dust? The mind is the Bodhi tree. The body is the mirror stand. The mirror is originally clean and pure. Where can it be stained by dust? But let's start with Shenxiu. I think this one's actually easier to understand. So again, I'll put it in the chat just to emphasize this one. And hopefully you can all copy and paste from the chat. You can do that, right? Yeah, copy. So please copy this because it'll disappear once I send you into breakout rooms. And let's talk about it. So again, I want you to figure out what is going on here. What sort of images are being set up here? What sort of spiritual practice is being recommended? And if you have time, you can also talk about Huineng and what is Huineng's critique of this first poem, okay? So we're going to talk about poetry. This book is very poetic, and we'll see it steps a bit away from logic, from clear, rational thinking, and uses analogy, analogical. So the adjectival form of analogy is analogical thinking. All right, any questions before we break out? So again, somebody please copy this, and when your friends in the breakout room say, oh wait, we were supposed to copy that, then you can share it with them, okay?